Subscribe now to William's Revenge Stories and hit the notification bell. You will not regret it. It was just a regular Tuesday in October when destiny decided to show me the true face of the person I had raised with so much love. I am Edward Miller. I am 73 years old. I built a business empire from nothing, and I was about to discover that my only son had been planning my destruction for months. It all started when I came back early from a canceled medical appointment. As I entered quietly through the back door so I would not wake my wife, who was resting because of her arthritis, I heard voices coming from my study. The voice of my son Ryan resonated with a coldness I had never perceived before. "The old man is getting more confused every day," he said with disdain. "Yesterday he asked me 3 times about the same contract. It is perfect for our plan." I stood petrified behind the slightly open door. The other voice belonged to a lawyer, someone I did not recognize. "Are you sure we can proceed without suspicion?" the professional asked. "Completely," Ryan replied with chilling confidence. "I have medical documentation suggesting cognitive deterioration. Dr. Harrison will help me with the official diagnosis. In 3 months, maximum 4, I will have total control of Miller Industries." My heart stopped. Dr. Harrison was our family doctor for 20 years. The company I had built brick by brick, contract by contract from my humble beginnings as a bricklayer was being planned to be stolen by my own son. "And your father suspects nothing," the lawyer insisted. Ryan laughed with a cruelty I had never heard. "Dad is sentimental. He thinks I am the perfect son he always wanted. He has no idea that I have been documenting every time he forgets something, every moment of confusion. I have recorded conversations where he seems disoriented, recorded without his consent. Does it matter? When I have legal control, he will be in a luxury nursing home where he can live his last years without worries. It is best for everyone." Tears burned my eyes, but not from sadness, but from a cold fury that was beginning to crystallize into something much more dangerous: absolute determination. "The $3.2 million in liquid assets will be transferred immediately," Ryan continued. "The company is worth approximately $8.5 million, according to the last evaluation. With the real estate properties, we are talking about almost $15 million in total." Every number was like a stab wound. Those millions represented 45 years of tireless work, of sacrifices, of sleepless nights, building something to leave for him. And if he resists legally, he will not be able to. By then, I will have power of attorney, due to mental incapacity. The medical diagnosis will be irrefutable. Besides, who is going to believe a confused old man over his own son? The lawyer seemed satisfied with the plan. "I will need $50,000 as a retainer to proceed with the documents." "You will have it tomorrow," Ryan confirmed. "Dad has always given me total access to the accounts. He will not even check where the money came from." At that moment, I understood the magnitude of my mistake. For years I had interpreted his interest in the business as filial dedication, his constant questions about my decisions, his insistence on being present at all important meetings, his exaggerated concern for my health. It had all been a meticulous reconnaissance operation. I had raised a predator who had been studying his prey for decades. "One more thing," Ryan added. "When I have control, I want Mary to be removed as well. That old woman does not deserve anything my father built. Mary, my wife of 48 years, who had been my loyal partner every step of the way. The man I had loved as a son wanted to destroy the woman who had raised him as her own too." I left the house in silence with my heart hammering and my mind already calculating. Ryan had made the most fatal mistake of his life. He had underestimated the man who had survived decades in a ruthless business world. As I drove aimlessly, a cold smile began to form on my lips. My son wanted to play chess with me perfect, but he barely knew the rules of the game while I had been a grandmaster, long before he was born. That night when I returned home, acting as if nothing had happened, I began planning the most devastating lesson Ryan Miller would receive in his life. a lesson that would teach him that experience always triumphs over poorly calculated ambition. The war had begun, but my son would not know he was fighting until it was too late. That early morning I could not sleep. While Mary rested beside me, my mind traveled 45 years back, to the day I arrived in this city with barely $20 in my pocket and calluses on my hands from so much construction work. I vividly remembered my first day as a laborer, carrying bags of cement under the scorching sun for a few dollars a day. The foreman shouted at me, "Hurry up, farm boy, time is money." I was 23 years old and had an impossible dream to build something of my own. Every brick I placed on those other people's sites was a silent promise to my future son. Someday I told myself, your dad will give you everything I never had. Mary came into my life when I barely had my first crew of workers. She sewed in the early morning to supplement our income while I saved every penny to buy my first piece of land. When Ryan was born, we swore he would know a different life. But while I relived those sacred memories, my phone vibrated. It was a message from my accountant. "Mr. Miller, I need to confirm the transfer of $50,000 from yesterday. It was authorized by you." My blood ran cold. Ryan had kept his word with the lawyer. I was financing my own destruction with my own money. I immediately called my private bank, where Lewis had attended me for 15 years. "Lewis, I need you to report any unusual movement in all my accounts, without exception." "Of course, Mr. Miller. Is there a problem?" "Let's just say I am doing a family audit," I replied with bitterness. 2 hours later, Lewis sent me a document that left me breathless. In the last 6 months, Ryan had withdrawn $180,000 in miscellaneous operating expenses. Every withdrawal had my supposed authorization, but I had never signed those documents. My own son had been forging my signature for half a year. That morning, I arrived early at the corporate office of Miller Industries. The 12-story building I had inaugurated with such pride 5 years ago now felt like enemy territory. I watched the employees greet me with their usual respect, unaware that their future was being negotiated in my absence. From my office on the 12th floor, I discreetly called Patricia Vance, a private investigator I had used in corporate fraud cases. "Patricia, I need you to investigate someone very close to me. Absolute discretion. What kind of investigation, Mr. Miller? I want to know who he meets, with what documents he handles, what plans he has, and I need legal evidence of everything. How much time do I have?" "Whatever is necessary, but act fast. I suspect time is running out." Patricia was a lethal professional. In 3 days, she delivered a report that exceeded my worst nightmares. Ryan was not only meeting weekly with the lawyer, Ramsey, but had contacted 5 competitor companies to sound out possible purchases of Miller Industries. He had requested independent evaluations of our assets and had consulted with 3 different doctors about mental incapacity declaration procedures. But the most devastating thing was in the surveillance photographs, Ryan entering Dr. Harrison's office with a manila envelope coming out smiling 2 hours later. Our family doctor, the man who had attended Ryan's birth, who had taken care of Mary during her cancer, who had saved me from a heart attack 3 years ago, was being bought to destroy me. That afternoon, when Ryan arrived at the office with his usual smile, I watched him with completely new eyes. I no longer saw the son I had educated at the best universities, but the predator who had been preparing my annihilation. "Dad, how do you feel today?" he asked with that fake concern I now recognized as pure manipulation. A little confused, I lied deliberately. "I think I signed some documents yesterday, but I do not remember which ones." His eyes shone with satisfaction. "Do not worry, Dad. I will take care of reviewing everything. You just rest." While he reviewed the papers on my desk, I discreetly activated the recorder Patricia had installed in my watch. Every condescending word, every paternalistic gesture would be documented. "Ryan," I said with a feigned trembling voice, "sometimes I feel like I'm losing my mind." Do you think I should see a specialist? I have it all arranged, Dad. Dr. Harrison wants to see you next week for some routine exams. Just as a precaution, the trap was confirmed. My own son was guiding me toward the medical slaughterhouse he had prepared. That night, in the solitude of my study, I opened the safe where I kept the most important documents of my life. Birth certificates, deeds, founding contracts, all the paper that proved 4 decades of meticulous construction. But now, for the first time, these documents would have a different purpose. They would not be the legacy I would leave to my son, but the weapons I would use to teach him the most expensive lesson of his existence. Ryan thought he was hunting a vulnerable old man. He had no idea he had awakened the most relentless businessman he would ever meet. I took my phone and dialed a number I had not used in 5 years. Andrew Wilson, Edward. What a surprise to hear from you. Andrew was the most lethal corporate shark in the country. If I needed to make someone disappear from the business world, he was my man. Andrew, I need you to come tomorrow early. We have to discuss a very delicate operation. What kind of operation? The kind that ends careers forever. As I hung up, a fierce smile drew on my face. Ryan had started a war, but I would finish it. And when I was done with him, his name would be synonymous with a warning in the entire industry. The hunt had begun, but this time I was the predator. Andrew Wilson arrived at my office at 6 in the morning, just like in the old days when we were partners in impossible projects. His presence had always been intimidating. 6'3" $1,500 suits, and a reputation that made entire corporations tremble. "Edward, you look terrible," he said while pouring coffee from my machine. "The last few days have been revealing," I replied, locking the door. "Andrew, I need someone to disappear from the business world completely. Unfair competition, something much more personal." I handed him the file Patricia had compiled. While he read it, I remembered the sacrifices I had made for the man who was now trying to destroy me. When Ryan turned 18, I sold my classic car, a 1967 Mustang I had restored with my own hands to pay for his first year at Harvard. It was my only personal luxury, but seeing his happy face, receiving the acceptance letter, was worth every penny. During his 4 university years, I worked 18 hours a day to cover the $280,000 his education cost. Mary sewed uniforms at night to help with extra expenses. We never told him we were sacrificing our vacations, our comfort, our own dreams for his future. When he graduated magna cum laude in business administration, I cried with pride at the ceremony. This boy is going to take the company to levels I never imagined. I told Mary while we watched him receive his diploma, how naive I was, Edward. The voice of Andrew brought me back to the present. "This is pure dynamite. Your son is committing several federal crimes, which specifically forgery of documents, bank fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, bribery of medical professionals. With the evidence you have here, he could be in prison for 25 years. 25 years, the same amount of time I had invested in building Miller Industries after his birth." My phone vibrated. It was a message from Ryan. "Dad, I confirmed your appointment with Dr. Harrison for tomorrow at 2 p.m. It is important that you go. Your mental health is a priority." The irony was crushing. The same son for whom I had mortgaged my house 3 times during the 2008 crisis to keep the company afloat. Now he was using those same resources to finance my destruction. I remembered that crisis vividly. The banks closed our credit lines overnight. I had 500 employees whose families depended on us. Ryan was 22 years old and studying his master's in Europe. "Dad, why don't you sell the company and we retire?" He had suggested over the phone from London because 500 families would be on the street. I replied, "We do not abandon our people." I worked like an animal for 2 years to save every job. I sold my art collection, our apartment at the beach. Even Mary's wedding rings were pawned. But we saved the company and every employee. When Ryan returned with his master's in international finance, I welcomed him like the prodigal son. I gave him an office on the 11th floor, a salary of $25,000 a month, and total access to the company operations. I want you to learn from the inside. I told him this company will be yours someday. Another decision that was now revealed as my doom. Andrew, I said, returning to reality, what options do I have? Several. We can report him criminally and destroy his life forever. Or we can be more creative. Creative how Andrew smiled with that expression that had terrified half the industry. Do you remember the Stanford operation of 2018? Of course I remembered. Andrew had publicly exposed a corrupt executive during a shareholders' meeting broadcast live. The scandal was so devastating that the man had to change his identity and move to another country. Ryan is planning an extraordinary meeting to declare you incompetent. Right? I checked the file. Indeed, Patricia had photographed documents showing plans for an urgent family meeting scheduled for Friday. How did you know it is the classic modus operandi? Gather witnesses present, false medical evidence, make you sign transfer documents under emotional pressure. My phone rang. It was Mary. Edward Ryan came home this morning asking for our wills. He said it was important to update them because of your condition. What condition I do not know, honey. He was very worried about you. Is there something you have not told me? The manipulation had started with her too. My wife, the woman who had sacrificed her youth for our dreams, was now being groomed to believe I was losing my mind. Mary, do not sign anything without consulting me first. Okay? Sure, but Edward, are you okay? Ryan mentioned you have been very forgetful lately. I hung up, feeling the rage transform into something much more dangerous. Absolute determination. Andrew, I want you to prepare the most devastating operation of your career. Ryan is going to have his family meeting, but he will be the one who leaves destroyed. What do you have in mind? I want us to document everything. Every conversation, every forged document, every conspirator involved. And when the time comes, we are going to expose it all publicly. Are you sure once we start, there is no turning back? I looked out the window toward the building I had built from scratch. Every floor represented years of effort. Every office was the result of calculated decisions. Every employee was part of the family I had formed. Ryan thought he could steal it all from me because he thought age had made me weak. He was about to discover he had confused wisdom with vulnerability. Andrew, my son wants to play dirty. Perfect, but he has studied business administration. I lived the business war for 4 decades. What is the final goal? That when I am done with him, his name is synonymous with betrayal in the entire industry. That no one ever hires him again or trusts him. Edward, that is a professional death sentence. Exactly. Andrew closed the file with a fierce smile. We are going to ruin his life so completely. He is going to beg for mercy. No, I corrected him with a glacial voice. We are going to teach him that when you betray a lion, you do not get his kingdom, you get his fangs. The perfect revenge was taking shape, and my son had no idea of the storm approaching. That afternoon, while I waited in the parking lot of Dr. Harrison's office, my mind wandered to Ryan's first steps. I remembered him at 3 years old, running through construction sites with his tiny yellow hard hat shouting, "Dad, Dad, look. While I directed the workers, someday this will be yours, champion," I told him while he pretended to drive the toy excavator I had bought him. His eyes shone with pure adoration every time he saw me arrive from work covered in dust but loaded with dreams. At 8 years old, he already knew how to read basic architectural blueprints. I took him to meetings with important clients, where he stayed quiet in his chair, absorbing every word like a sponge. The investors were amused, seeing the little engineer asking smart questions about foundations and structures. This boy has business material, the architect Morales told me after a presentation where Ryan had pointed out an error in ventilation calculations. He was right. My son had found a flaw that would have cost us $50,000 in repairs later. But while I remembered those golden moments, Patricia sent me new photographs that shattered every beautiful memory. The images showed Ryan leaving the medical office with a triumphant smile, carrying a manila folder. 20 minutes later, cameras caught him in a nearby coffee shop, handing documents to a man I recognized immediately, the notary Connor, specialist in wills and legal powers. My phone vibrated with a message from Patricia Edward. I intercepted the conversation. Ryan just obtained a false medical diagnosis, certifying severe cognitive deterioration, scheduled date for legal presentation next Tuesday. Tuesday in 4 days, my own son planned to present fraudulent documents to declare me legally incompetent. Dr. Harrison received me with his usual cordiality, but something in his eyes had changed. During 30 years, this man had been like a brother to our family. He had attended every illness of Ryan. He had been present when Mary fought against cancer. He had been the doctor who saved me during my heart attack. Edward Ryan mentioned some concerns about your mental state lately. He began with a strangely formal voice. What kind of concerns, doctor? Episodes of confusion, memory loss, difficulties making complex decisions. I think we should do some specialized exams. Every word was a stab. This man who had sworn to protect my health was now actively participating in my destruction for money from my own son. Dr. Harrison, I said with apparent calm, how much did Ryan pay you for this diagnosis? His face went pale. Edward, I do not know what you are talking about. I'm just worried about your well-being. 50,000. 100,000. What was the price of 30 years of friendship? I think this kind of paranoia confirms my suspicions, he replied nervously. I'm going to recommend an immediate psychiatric evaluation. I left the office with a complete recording of the conversation and the absolute certainty that not a trace remained of the Dr. Harrison I had known. My son had not only bought a false diagnosis, he had corrupted one of the most respected men in my life. That night in my study, I opened the family photo album Mary had kept for decades. Page after page showed the evolution of our son, his first communion, high school graduation, college, admission, obtaining degrees, promotions in the company. In every photo, Ryan smiled with that mix of pride and ambition I had interpreted as filial love. Now seeing those same images with knowledge of his betrayal, I could detect something more sinister, the cold calculation of someone who had always seen our relationship as a long-term investment. My phone rang. It was Andrew Edward. I have explosive news. Ryan is not only forging medical documents, he has also been manipulating the company's financial statements. How is that possible? Your accountant, Jim, is involved. They have been inflating operating expenses and creating phantom invoices to justify money transfers to accounts controlled by Ryan. The betrayal was deeper than I had imagined. Jim had been my accountant for 15 years. I had hired him when he was just a fresh graduate. I had paid for his specialization in taxation. I had been godfather to his youngest daughter. How much money are we talking about? Approximately $800,000 in the last 2 years. $800,000, almost $1 million, that my son had systematically stolen while I trusted him blindly. Andrew, I need you to contact Robert Stone in the anti-corruption DA's office. This is no longer just family betrayal. It is corporate fraud on a large scale. Are you sure you want to involve authorities? Once we take that step, Ryan could face real criminal charges. I closed my eyes and pictured my son at 5 years old, sleeping in my arms after reading him his favorite story about dragons and princesses. In that story, the prince always saved the kingdom from the forces of evil. How ironic that now I was the prince and my own son was the dragon. Andrew Ryan decided to become a criminal the day he started stealing from the company I built for him. He is no longer my son. He is a criminal who happens to share my last name. Understood. Tomorrow we will meet with Stone. But Edward, once we put this in motion, you cannot back down. Are you prepared to see your son in prison? I looked once more at the photographs scattered on my desk. In all of them I appeared smiling with paternal pride, completely unaware I was feeding the viper that would one day try to poison me. Andrew, my son died to me the day he decided to betray me. What we are chasing now is just a criminal who needs to be stopped. Perfect. Tomorrow we begin the legal phase of his destruction. That night while Mary slept, I went out to the garden where I had taught Ryan to ride a bike, where we had played soccer on Sundays, where we had built a treehouse together that still stood. Every beautiful memory was now contaminated by the knowledge of his betrayal. But instead of sadness, I felt an iron determination growing in my chest. Ryan had bet everything that paternal love would make me weak before his attack. He did not calculate that that same love, once betrayed, would become the most relentless force he would ever face. The legal war would begin tomorrow, and my son was about to discover he had chosen the wrong enemy. The meeting with Robert Stone at the district attorney's office was scheduled for 8 in the morning. While I got ready, I remembered the day I made the riskiest decision of my business career, the expansion into the hotel sector. It was 2010, and Ryan had just turned 25. He had returned from his master's full of innovative ideas about investment diversification. "Dad, the tourism sector is the future. We should build luxury resorts," he had suggested during a family dinner. His proposal was brilliant. He had prepared a market analysis of 150 pages, detailed financial projections, and contacts with European investors interested in the project. I felt immensely proud of his business vision. We invested $4.2 million in the construction of the Paradise Bay Resort, our first 5-star hotel. Ryan personally supervised every aspect of the project, from architectural design to staff selection. We worked 18 hours a day for 2 years to make his dream come true. When we finally opened the doors in 2012, the success was immediate. Reservations sold out for the first 6 months. Online reviews were exceptional, and revenues exceeded our most optimistic projections by 40%. "Dad, this is just the beginning," Ryan told me while we toasted with champagne at the official opening. "In 5 years, we will have a hotel chain that will compete with the best in the world." That night, I cried with pride watching my son shine among international investors, speaking fluently in 3 languages about growth projections and market strategies. "This boy is going to take our name to heights I never imagined," I whispered to Mary while we watched his presentation, but now 7 years later, I discovered that that same intelligence I had admired so much was being used to destroy me systematically. Robert Stone was a relentless prosecutor with a reputation for not accepting bribes or political pressure. His office looked like a bunker: security cameras, metal detectors, and armed guards in every corner. "Mr. Miller," he said, while reviewing the file Andrew had delivered, "these evidences are extraordinarily compromising. Your son has violated at least 12 different federal laws, which are the most serious forgery of official documents, aggravated bank fraud, bribery of medical officials, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Just the first 3 could mean between 15 and 20 years in prison." 20 years. Ryan was 32 years old. If convicted, he would leave prison at 52 with his professional life completely ruined. DA Stone Andrew intervened. "We also have evidence that he is bribing company employees to obtain confidential information." Stone raised an eyebrow. "What kind of information? Access codes to banking systems, passwords for corporate accounts, business strategy documents, asset evaluations. Basically, he is buying internal spies." My phone vibrated with a message from Patricia Edward Urgent. "Ryan is in a meeting with 3 employees from your finance department. They are at the Continental Hotel Room 1247. I have recording equipment installed." "Excuse me," I said, getting up. "I need to attend to something urgent." I left the office and immediately called Patricia. "What is happening in that meeting?" "It is incredible. Edward, Ryan is offering them $1,500 each to testify about your supposed mental incapacity during board meetings. He also promised them to keep their jobs when he takes control of the company. $1,500 per employee. My son was buying false witnesses with money he had stolen from corporate accounts. Who are the employees? Carmen from the accounting department, Michael from HR, and Fernando from finance. Carmen. I had hired her 8 years ago when she was a single mother and urgently needed work to support her 2 daughters. I had paid for forensic accounting specialization courses and promoted her 3 times. Last year, when her youngest daughter needed heart surgery, I personally covered all medical expenses. Michael was even more painful. I knew him since he was a college intern. I had taken him under my wing. I had been a witness at his wedding godfather to his first son. During the pandemic, when the company faced difficulties, he was one of the few employees I kept on full payroll to protect his family. Fernando had started as a messenger 15 years ago. I myself had motivated him to study finance at night. I had financed his education and promoted him gradually until he became department head. 3 people I had treated like family who had prospered thanks to my trust and generosity were now willing to betray me for money stolen from my own company. Patricia, are they accepting the proposal? Carmen seems doubtful, but Michael and Fernando already signed commitment documents. Ryan handed them envelopes with cash as an advance. I returned to Stone's office with a controlled fury that gave me absolute mental clarity. Prosecutor, we just documented active bribery of witnesses. My son is right now buying false testimonies to use in fraudulent legal proceedings. Do you have direct evidence, audio, and video recordings of the transactions? The employees are receiving cash in exchange for planned perjury. Stone leaned forward with renewed interest. Mr. Miller, this turns the case into something much more serious. We are talking about an organized criminal operation. What does that mean in legal terms? It means we can proceed with racketeering charges, which would take the potential sentence to 30 years in prison without possibility of parole. 30 years an effective life sentence for someone of Ryan's age. Andrew said, Stone, turning to my lawyer, I need you to prepare a controlled evidence operation. We want to capture Ryan in the act of committing these crimes with eyewitnesses and irrefutable documentation. What kind of operation? A trap. We are going to make Edward participate in a situation where Ryan feels forced to reveal his entire criminal plan while we record every word. I looked toward the window of the prosecutor's office, observing the city I had helped build during 4 decades of honest work. Every building, every project, every business success had been achieved with integrity and respect for the law. Now, my own son, educated with the most solid values, had chosen the path of crime to steal what he would have one day inherited legitimately. D.A. Stone, I said with a firm voice, let's set that trap. It is time Ryan learns that the consequences of betraying family go far beyond losing an inheritance. Are you sure once we start this operation there is no turning back? Your son will face full justice. My son died to me when he decided to become a criminal. What we are hunting now is just delinquent who needs to pay for his crimes. The final phase of my revenge was about to begin, and Ryan had no idea he had fatally underestimated the man who had dedicated his life to building legitimate empires. The trap would be executed on Friday afternoon during the supposed emergency family meeting Ryan had planned. But before that final confrontation, Patricia handed me a discovery that exceeded all my worst fears. Edward, I found something that is going to destroy you, she told me while opening a red folder in my private office. Ryan not only has secret local accounts, he has been transferring money to banks in the Cayman Islands for 3 years. The pages showed international banking movements for a total of $2.3 million. Every transfer had been carefully planned to avoid automatic reports to the IRS. My son was not only a thief, he was an international tax evader. While I processed this devastating information, my mind flew to the memories of when I financed his graduate education in London. It had been his dream to study international finance at the London School of Economics, one of the most prestigious universities in the world. "Dad, this opportunity will change my life forever," he had told me with tears in his eyes when the acceptance letter arrived, but the cost is $180,000 for the full 2 years. $180,000. In 2008, that amount represented almost half the value of our company. The global financial crisis had hit our sector hard, and many construction companies were going bankrupt daily. But seeing the hope in Ryan's eyes filled me with determination. "Son, if that university can turn you into the businessman you dream of being, we will find a way to pay for it." I mortgaged our main house, sold my pre-Columbian art collection that had taken 20 years to gather, and persuaded 3 private investors to lend me the remaining money at 18% annual interest. During those 2 years, I worked like a man possessed to pay not only for Ryan's education, but also the interest on the loans. Mary had to cancel her weekly spa treatment she needed for her arthritis, and I stopped buying business books, which had always been my personal passion, but every sacrifice was worth it. When I received Ryan's weekly calls from London, excitedly telling me about his classes on international markets, advanced financial theory and global investment strategies. "Dad, I am learning capital management techniques that will revolutionize our company," he told me with youthful enthusiasm. "When I return, we are going to expand internationally." Upon graduating with honors, we organized a celebration party that cost $35,000. We invited all our business partners, key employees, and extended family. Ryan gave a speech that made me cry with pride. "Everything I am I owe to my father," he declared before 200 guests. "He sacrificed everything to give me the best education possible. I promise to use this knowledge to honor his legacy and take our family company to international levels." That night, while cleaning up after the party, I told Mary, "Honey, I think we made the smartest investment of our lives. Ryan is going to transform everything we have built. How naive I was. That education that cost me so much to provide had been used to learn how to steal from me more efficiently." "Patricia," I said, closing the folder, "how did you discover these international accounts?" "Ryan made a mistake. One of the transfers bounced due to technical problems at the bank, and the money returned temporarily to an intermediate account we were able to trace." "How much money is in those accounts currently?" "Approximately $1.8 million. But Edward, there is something more worrying." She handed me another series of documents showing email communications between Ryan and an investment firm from Hong Kong. "Your son is negotiating the sale of insider information about Miller Industries projects to Asian competitors. The emails show he already delivered architectural plans for 3 developments that have not yet been publicly announced. Industrial espionage. My own son was selling trade secrets to foreign companies while I trusted him as my right hand." The phone rang. It was Ryan. "Dad, how do you feel today? I hope you rested well after your consultation with Dr. Harrison." His voice had that fake concern I now recognized as pure theatrical manipulation. "I feel a little confused, son. The doctor mentioned some additional exams." "Yes, Dad, in fact, I wanted to talk to you about that. Could you come to the office this afternoon? I have some important documents that need your signature." The transfer documents. Ryan was accelerating his schedule, probably because he suspected his time was running out. "Of course, son, what time at 4 would be perfect? And Dad, it would be good if Mary came too. There are important family decisions to discuss." Mary. He wanted my wife present as a witness to my supposed incompetence, or perhaps to pressure me emotionally to sign documents I did not understand completely. "We will be there, Ryan." After hanging up, I immediately called D.A. Stone. "Robert." Ryan accelerated the schedule. "The confrontation will be today at 4 in the afternoon." "Perfect. We will have recording teams installed in your office and 2 undercover agents in the building. Are you prepared for this performance? I have been preparing all week." Ryan is going to see the confused and vulnerable father he expects to find. "Edward." Remember that once we have the recordings of him confessing the crimes, we will proceed with the immediate arrest. There will be no opportunity for regrets. Robert, after what I have discovered this week, my only regret would be not having discovered his betrayal years earlier. That afternoon, while I prepared for the most important performance of my life, I looked one last time at Ryan's graduation photograph in London. In the image, he held his diploma with a radiant smile while I hugged him with absolute paternal pride. That photograph had been on my desk for 8 years, reminding me daily of the most important investment I had made in my life. Now that same image reminded me of the bitterest lesson I had ever learned, that unconditional love can create monsters when combined with privileged education and unlimited opportunities. Ryan had used every dollar invested in his education, every connection I had provided him, every knowledge he had acquired to plan the destruction of the man who had sacrificed everything to give him those tools. But in 4 hours, my son was going to discover he had fatally underestimated his most important professor, the man who had taught him everything he knew about business loyalty and the devastating consequences of betraying family trust. The final lesson was about to begin. At 3:30 in the afternoon, I arrived at the corporate office, accompanied by Mary, who looked confused by the urgency of the meeting. D.A. Stone's undercover agents were already positioned, one as a maintenance technician on the 11th floor, and another as a potential client in the waiting room. While we went up in the elevator, Mary took my arm with genuine concern. "Edward, are you really okay? Ryan has been very worried about your mental health lately." The manipulation had worked perfectly with her. My wife, the smartest woman I knew, had been convinced that I was losing my mental faculties. "I just feel a little overwhelmed with so many business decisions," I replied with the slightly trembling voice I had been practicing. "Maybe Ryan is right about delegating more responsibilities." Her eyes filled with compassion. "Honey, there is nothing wrong with accepting help. You have worked so hard your whole life." While we waited outside Ryan's office, my mind traveled to one of my most cherished memories, his 25th birthday. I had organized a surprise that cost me 6 months of secret planning. Ryan had always admired business history, especially biographies of industrialists who built empires from poverty. His personal hero was Warren Buffett, and he had read every book available about his rise to power. For his birthday, I personally contacted Buffett's assistant and managed to get a private 1-hour meeting between the tycoon and my son. The meeting took place at Berkshire Hathaway's corporate office with professional photographers, documenting every moment. "Dad, this is the most incredible gift of my life." Ryan had told me with tears of emotion when the magnate personally dedicated a copy of his biography to him. I never imagined I would meet my business idol. During that meeting, Buffett had given him specific advice on international expansion, investment diversification, and the importance of maintaining family values in business. Ryan took notes during the whole conversation as if he were in the most important class of his existence. Young Miller, the tycoon, had told him at the end, "Your father has built something extraordinary. Make sure to honor that legacy with absolute integrity." That night, during the celebration dinner, Ryan hugged me with an intensity he had never shown before. "Dad, I promise I will never let you down. Everything I achieve in life will be to honor what you have built and make you feel proud to call me your son." How prophetic that promise had been. Now, 7 years later, he was about to break it in the most devastating way possible. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller, please come in," said Ryan's secretary, interrupting my memories. Upon entering his office, I immediately noticed there were 3 additional people present: lawyer Ramsey, notary, Connor, and surprisingly, Dr. Harrison. "Mom, Dad, thanks for coming," said Ryan, with that fake smile I could now detect instantly. "We have prepared this meeting because we are all worried about your well-being." "What kind of worries?" I asked, with a deliberately confused voice. Dr. Harrison cleared his throat. Edward, after our recent exams, I've identified worrying signs of cognitive deterioration that require immediate attention. Cognitive deterioration I do not understand. Dad Ryan intervened with fake compassion. You have been forgetting important conversations, signing documents, without remembering them making contradictory business decisions. We are here because we love you and want to protect you. Mary leaned forward with anxiety. How serious is it, Doctor, serious enough to require Edward to delegate the administration of his financial and business affairs to someone he trusts? Replied Harrison with the assurance of someone who had rehearsed his speech. Lawyer Ramsey spread a folder of documents on the desk. Mr. Miller, we have prepared a comprehensive power of attorney that will allow Ryan to handle your affairs while you receive necessary medical treatment. Medical treatment? Mary asked, alarmed. Nothing drastic. Ryan lied smoothly. Just a period of rest in a specialized clinic where Dad can recover without the stress of running the company. A specialized clinic. The euphemism for the mental asylum where they plan to commit me once they obtain legal control of my assets. I do not know, I said, deliberately shaking my hands. This all seems very sudden. Dad, it is precisely that confusion that worries us. Ryan insisted with increasing urgency. You need to sign these documents today so we can begin to protect everything you have built. The moment had arrived. It was time to get the full confession D.A. Stone needed. Ryan, I am scared, I said with a broken voice. What will happen to the company? What will happen to me? His eyes shone with anticipated triumph. Dad, I will take care of everything. The company will be in the best hands possible. As for you, you will live comfortably without worries for the rest of your life. But will I still be the owner? Ryan exchanged glances with Lawyer Ramsey before answering. Dad, the important thing is that you are well taken care of. Legal details are complicated for someone in your condition. What legal details? I insisted. Well said Ramsey, intervening to protect assets from possible lawsuits or tax problems. It will be necessary to transfer the formal ownership of the company to Ryan, but only as a protective measure. Transfer ownership. Yes, Dad, Ryan confirmed with increasing impatience. But do not worry about that. The important thing is that you sign now so we can begin to help you immediately. Dr. Harrison leaned forward. Edward, your condition is deteriorating rapidly. Every day that passes without treatment is crucial. And if I do not sign? I asked with a trembling voice. The silence in the room became tense. Ryan looked nervously at his accomplices before answering. Dad, if you do not cooperate voluntarily, we would have to proceed with a legal declaration of incompetence. It would be a public and humiliating process we would prefer to avoid. Legal declaration of incompetence. Yes, admitted Lawyer Ramsey. We have sufficient medical documentation to proceed through the judicial route if necessary. But it would be much better for everyone if this is resolved as a family. Mary took my hand with tears in her eyes. Edward, if these professionals say you need help, we should listen to them. I looked at my wife, the woman who had shared 48 years of my life, completely convinced she was helping her sick husband. Ryan's manipulation had been so effective that even she had become an unwilling accomplice. Okay, I said finally with a defeated voice. If everyone believes it is best, I will sign the documents. Ryan could not hide his smile of triumph. Dad, you are making the right decision. In 6 months, when you are recovered, you will see this was best for everyone. While I pretended to read the documents with confusion, I knew every word of this conversation was being recorded by D.A. Stone's teams. Ryan had just publicly confessed to medical fraud, conspiracy, emotional extortion, and forced commitment plans. I took the pen with a shaking hand, knowing this would be the last act of my performance as a helpless victim. In minutes, my son would discover he had fatally underestimated the man who had taught him everything about strategy, patience, and the devastating art of calculated revenge. I signed with a trembling hand and deliberately scrawled an illegible last name. That stroke was enough for Ramsay to put away the papers greedily. They had fallen into the net. The barely audible click, coming from the fake smoke detector, confirmed that everything had been recorded. I feigned dizziness. Ryan took the opportunity to hug me with feigned tenderness and address the group proceed with the next phase. His voice reflected haste. He thought the trophy was already his. While Mary accompanied me to the sofa, I remembered 2015 when the company inaugurated its first office in Singapore. That decision was risky. No one in the country imagined a U.S. builder competing with Asian giants in port engineering. I traveled 70 times that year, slept in airports, and closed contracts at 3 a.m. with improvised translators. Ryan, then director of operations, called me a hero. He said he would learn from my boldness to someday surpass me. I never thought his ambition would mutate into poison. In the present, the lawyer opened a new folder, marked Continuity Plan, and slid it toward Ryan. "You require signing as interim CEO," he explained. "The board will ratify it in the next session." The notary nodded while stamping my consents. Dr. Harrison reviewed a clinical schedule where the date of my commitment stood out in red. Everything was calculated to the minute. Then the last guest appeared, Stephen Carter, former director of a rival firm expelled for embezzlement. I had seen him only once at an industrial cocktail party. Now he entered with a sly smile. "Mr. Carter will be my strategic advisor," announced Ryan with a triumphant voice. "He will supervise the firm while Dad rests." I clenched my fists. Carter had bankrupted 3 subsidiaries and fired 2,000 workers. His mere presence was enough to dismantle my corporate culture based on loyalty and fair wages. Private guards hired by my own son escorted Carter through the 11th floor toward the boardroom. As soon as they crossed the door, the undercover agents exchanged glances. The final piece of the puzzle appeared before the cameras. They asked Mary to accompany the doctor to explain the treatment. My wife, convinced she was protecting me, left with wet eyes. Ryan and I remained. The office turned into a silent ring. "Dad," he whispered, forgetting the mask, "this is for the best. You are not in condition to lead, and my people, my projects. Everything will continue, just with more efficiency. Learn to let go." His brazenness tore the last thread of mercy I might have had left. I nodded with resigned appearance and asked to go to the bathroom. There behind the mirror was the additional microphone. I whispered the agreed phrase. Eagleface confirmed. Substitute named. D.A. Stone from a van in the parking lot received the signal. The operation went from simple gathering to flagrant crime. I returned to the room just as Ryan was celebrating with Ramsay and Carter, the imminent shareholders' meeting. I heard enough phrases to bury their careers. "With the old man out, we will sell the hotel division as a package to the Chinese," commented Carter. "Correct," replied my son. $7 million net. The money will go to Horizon Trust in the Cayman Islands. The lawyer added, "I have prepared mandatory resignations for the senior staff. We will need to liquidate 100% to avoid leaks. Liquidate fire those who had left their soul for the firm." I swallowed fire but kept the mask. In parallel, my memories returned to 2017 when we obtained the reconstruction contract after the hurricanes. I hugged every bricklayer when handing them an extraordinary bonus. I said, "You raised these cities, not the politicians." Today, those same workers would be thrown out by the corrupt new administration of my own son. Hours later, back home, Mary confronted me with agitation. "The doctor says you need to be admitted this Sunday. Why didn't you tell me about your illness?" I hugged her, firmly whispered in her ear that everything was a setup, and that she would understand soon. I asked her for absolute faith for 48 hours. I saw in her eyes the clash between love and doubt, but finally she nodded. That early morning I met with Andrew and Stone in the old warehouse in the blue-collar district, where the company was born when I drove a beat-up pickup truck. On a metal table we spread blueprints of the corporate building access routes, central servers, cameras. We decided to block the master codes on Friday at 6 p.m. Once the court order was executed, the systems would freeze, preventing Ryan from transferring a single penny. "What if he tries to flee?" asked Andrew. "He won't," replied Stone. "He will be too busy defending himself from racketeering charges." At dawn, before leaving, I touched the peeling wall of that warehouse. There I had mixed cement with my own hands when I dreamed of buying the first truck. I felt the roughness under my fingers and understood that although my son sold buildings, he could never appropriate my history. That gave me a fierce calm. Thursday passed with tense calm. Ryan sent emails announcing the temporary change in management to the managers. He asked them to keep silent for the engineer's sake. Patricia intercepted the responses, uncertainty, but also obedience. Many owed their mortgages to the company and feared losing everything. That night, I reviewed the recommendation letters I had written in the past for Ryan Stanford Wharton, MIT. Each one carried my signature, my prestige, my direct line to Dean's. I burned the copies in the fireplace. The flames devoured broken promises while sharpening my conviction. Friday, 5:55 p.m. The minority shareholders were gathered in the main hall connected by video conference. Ryan, impeccable in his blue suit, opened the session. "I declare this extraordinary meeting initiated to formalize my appointment as CEO." The doors closed. The electromagnetic locks turned red. The court order had been activated. On the screens, the video call signal froze. Then the emblem of the district attorney's office appeared. Ryan looked around, bewildered. Lawyer Ramsey lost color when he saw the agents with official badges enter. Carter tried to flee through the service exit, but another team was already waiting for him. I entered in silence behind the officers. I did not wear a suit. I wore the yellow hard hat Ryan used as a child and a construction vest stained with concrete symbol of my roots. Upon seeing me, my son's face deformed with stupor. I extended my arms like someone offering a hug, but my words were as cold as steel. "Son, welcome to reality. The work you tried to tear down has foundations you never understood." The agents read him his rights, while hidden cameras broadcast everything to the shareholders and the financial press Stone had discreetly summoned. Every crime was narrated with dates, amounts, names. Ryan's perfect mask shattered before half the country. When they handcuffed him, he stammered, "My name, Dad," I only replied. "Chess pieces do not beat the player who moves them." He fell to his knees, remembering perhaps that wooden board where I taught him the first Sicilian opening. That prodigy child had forgotten the golden rule. Never underestimate the master. The day was not over yet, but the board was already sentenced. As they led Ryan out of the room, I took a deep breath. The air tasted like fresh concrete, like early mornings on site, like legitimate victory, and it was barely the prelude to the total devastation that awaited in the final act. As I left the building, the siren of the vehicle transporting Ryan faded into the afternoon traffic. There was no relief. I was just starting the task of unearthing every rotten vein he had grafted onto my heritage. That night, I set up my headquarters in the home library. I spread out deeds, balance sheets, contracts, corporate minutes, and USB drives like someone preparing a war map. I wanted to see line by line the itinerary of his betrayal. While I reviewed folders, a memory broke through the afternoon of 1989 when I signed the purchase of our first industrial plot. I had 28 employees and an impossible credit. However, feeling that dusty earth under my boots made me glimpse buildings that did not yet exist. Today, 3 decades later, each of those structures was in danger of ending pulverized, not by bankruptcy, but by the greed of my own heir. At 2 a.m., Patricia arrived with the cloned hard drive from Ryan's laptop. We connected it to the projector. A tree of encrypted folders appeared, christened with names of plays: Hamlet, Macbeth, Lear. We opened Macbeth. It contained a 120-page document titled Patrimonial Substitution Plan Final Version. The first paragraphs detailed my fictitious diagnosis, the medical protocol for my irreversible deterioration, and the legal route to incapacitate me before a civil judge. The later sections were even more chilling: immediate transfer of 51% of shares to a protective trust with Ryan as sole beneficiary, scheduled sale of the hotel division to a Hong Kong consortium for $7 million, tax-free thanks to the shell company Horizon Trust, liquidation of 120 low-productivity workers in a span no greater than 6 months, definitive removal of my remains. When the old man passes away to a private cemetery in Houston, far from any press, the coldness with which he defined my burial exceeded everything I had read about parricidal kings in classic works. It was not just a robbery, it was a moral demolition of my existence. On the other side of the desk, Mary listened to every line. It had taken her hours to assimilate the arrest scene. Now she observed the monitor with the severe serenity that only women who have seen too much pain possess. When she read the clause where Ryan planned to sell the family house to optimize liquidity, she put her hand to her chest and said with a harsh voice, "That child we raised ceased to exist a long time ago, and we did not see it." I had no words. I took her hand and caressed it with silent gratitude. Then my phone rang. It was Lewis, the bank manager engineer. They just tried to transfer $500,000 from your corporate account to a bank in Nassau. The system blocked it due to the alert you ordered. Proceed to freeze any movement linked to my digitized signatures until further notice. Ryan, even handcuffed, had moved pieces through proxies. That confirmed he did not operate alone. At dawn, I convened the loyal managers in a private video call, exposed an extract of the substitution plan, and showed them the court order that guaranteed my absolute control while the investigation lasted. Some lowered their heads in shame. Others, like Carmen, shed tears and asked for forgiveness for having been seduced by easy money. Whoever cooperates will keep their job and their dignity, I sentenced. Whoever covers for my son will face justice. You have 24 hours. Within a few hours, emails arrived with voluntary confessions. Among them, a crucial revelation. Michael had been the connection with the Asian conglomerate. In an attached folder resided the preliminary sale contract of the company signed under pseudonyms, with execution date 30 days out. Also appearing were bribes for an official of the Department of Commerce who was to expedite permits. The network was more extensive than imagined. I handed that package to the DA. Stone responded by sending me the recordings of Ryan's first declarations. I heard his voice broken, assuring that everything was lawyer Ramsey's idea. It was the same tactic he had used as a child when he broke a vase and pointed at the dog. Now the dog was his team of accomplices. That afternoon I walked the corridors of the main plant. Every photograph hung on the walls told an epic. Workers welding beams under a storm, inaugurations with white helmets, smiles at end-of-year parties. I stopped before the image of Ryan, age 10, holding the inaugural ribbon of our first office building. I touched the glass. His reflection superimposed on mine seemed to ask me who had failed. I found no answer. Around 6, Andrew arrived with a bag of newly gathered evidence. On the table, he spread Dr. Harrison's bank statements. Monthly deposits coming from a shell pharmaceutical company controlled by Carter. There were also photographs of night meetings at the Aurora restaurant, where Ramsey handed envelopes to court clerks. The conspiracy encompassed doctors, notaries, bureaucrats, and even a substitute judge willing to certify my incapacity. Everything was ready to admit you on Sunday, Andrew explained. They already had a room assigned at the Alcazar Clinic, the psychiatric wing with restricted access. I felt a repulsive vertigo, imagining myself locked up, medicated by force while my last name was auctioned. My blood froze for an instant. Then came a wave of fierce relief. I had stopped the machinery just seconds before it crushed me. The next step was to shield physical properties. I ordered the legal department to register precautionary measures on the 17 key lands. Hotels, dry ports, industrial parks. Any attempt at sale or mortgage would be automatically rejected. I signed the instructions with blue ink, my emblematic founder, color a clear symbol that I was still in command. At midnight, Patricia brought a classified envelope, the complete log of Ryan's conversations with the Hong Kong consortium. In the last email, he promised to deliver the company debt-free and without the sentimental interference of the founder. I reread that phrase until I memorized it. I decided I had to return it to the sender with a sharp modification. I replied from Ryan's account. The prosecutor authorized the temporary impersonation for evidentiary purposes. The founder is still alive, lucid, and owner of every brick. Agreements annulled. Shove the check where it fits. I pressed the send and experienced a joy that no literary revenge could describe. At 3 a.m, now alone in the library, I opened the small safe where I kept a forgotten object. The pocket watch I inherited from my father, an illiterate farmer who taught me to respect the land and one's word. The mechanism still beat. I rested it on the document of the substitution plan and understood the metaphor the honest gears would end up crushing Ryan's corrupt machinery. Dawn arrived wrapped in silence. My shoulders ached, but my mind burned with pristine clarity. I already knew every stretch of the plot, every accomplice, every offshore account. The network was dismantled. The master stroke was missing, selling the company in secret, just as he had planned, but under my conditions and for a purpose he never imagined. That gigantic design to become a casualty on my sword would begin to execute in a few hours. As I placed the yellow helmet on the desk, I knew that the legacy would not only survive, it would transform into an impregnable fortress, built with the cement of experience and the just fury of a patriarch who should never have been underestimated. A silent Saturday broke when I stamped my signature on the document that would unleash the definitive corporate earthquake, a confidentiality agreement with the Swiss firm Bachmann Vogt Specialists in lightning acquisitions. 5 pages were enough to shield the operation from prying eyes. The central clause required concluding the sale in 10 business days without preliminary announcements or public audits. For an external observer, the speed bordered on suicidal. For me, it was the final hammer blow before any desperate ally of Ryan raised their head. While the ink was still drying, I received Patricia's report. From his provisional cell, my son had contacted the tax lawyer, Lorena, promising her 10% of everything left standing if she managed to freeze my assets via commercial court. It was clear that even shackled, he continued moving pawns. I responded by getting 3 moves ahead. I ordered Andrew to present before the same court the evidence of transnational bribery discovered in the Hamlet and Lear folders. With a single brief, we dismantled any claim for a precautionary measure. No magistrate would risk their career to protect someone accused of organized crime with accounts in the Caymans. Act immediately, I convened Cecilia, Director of Human Resources, since the typewriter era. I entrusted her with the most delicate piece of my strategy, activating the labor shareholding program I had designed 20 years ago but never executed. The mechanism would immediately transfer 3% of the capital to a collective trust for employees with more than 10 years of seniority. That tiny percentage being included in the Swiss contract guaranteed multiplied indemnities, and above all, turned every veteran worker into a moral custodian of the transaction. If anyone tried to reverse the sale, they would face not only me, but 500 voices with legitimate rights over the heritage. Cecilia, with shiny eyes, needed several seconds to react. Then, in an almost childish gesture, she hugged the guidelines folder as if it were an Olympic trophy. That reaction sealed my certainty the company would never return to the hands of opportunists. It remained to navigate the express audit demanded by the Swiss. To avoid leaks, we enabled the plant basement as an analog data room. No computer connected to the internet, only coded printouts and pocket calculators. For 48 hours, a team of forensic accountants, all trusted veterans, reviewed every invoice, payroll, and promissory note. The average sleep was 2 hours per head. Mine, none. Caffeine became my fuel again, just like in the years when I raised walls at dawn and negotiated credits at dusk. On Monday, on the edge of 6 a knock rumbled on the door of my home office. 2 IRS inspector spokesmen for an anonymous complaint demanded immediate access to my accounting records. Their order bore the provisional signature of a substitute judge, the same one Ryan had bribed months ago. I kept a serene countenance. I offered coffee and exhibited the federal resolution suspending all diligence while the criminal investigation remained open. I handed them copies. Upon reading the letterhead of the anti-corruption district attorney, they turned pale and withdrew without taking a sip. It was my son's last slap, dissipated in less than 20 minutes. Mid-morning, Mary entered with a tea tray and a question that had been floating in her gaze for hours. "Are you really going to sell what you built with your hands?" I invited her to sit in front of me and unfolded the schedule. Point 1. Liability liquidation. Point 2. Extraordinary payment to the Labor Trust. Point 3. Transfer of the surplus to a new patrimonial society in which she would be the majority shareholder. I did not speak of myself. My personal future was irrelevant. I needed her to understand that the legacy would change form, not essence. At the end, she whispered, "I trust you just promise me this won't tear out your soul." I answered her with the naked truth. I had lost my soul the day I heard Ryan planning my burial. What I was doing now was saving the dignity of every brick before the fire spread. Tuesday 11th, 57 p.m. Armored boardroom. 5 representatives of Bachmann Vogt in front of me. On the table, 2 identical folders, one in English, one in German. We reviewed annexes for 7 hours without a single break. Every figure coincided with the financial statements purged of corruption. At 7:05 a.m., we signed the definitive contract for $3.5 million. Net figure transferable in 3 tranches of 48 hours. As soon as I ran the pen over the last page, I felt an internal click, as if an ancestral stone left my chest. There was no toast. The Swiss packed documents and left for the airport, escorted by my security team. I stayed looking at the empty table. There ended my reign and began the crossing toward a future without walls, nor marathon meetings. Upon leaving the building, the early sun illuminated the yellow helmet hanging on the rear-view mirror of my truck. I took it and placed it on the passenger seat, symbol that the physical work had concluded. But my work as an architect of destinies was just facing its final phase on the way to the medium security prison. I received the banking confirmation of the first deposit, $1.5 million crystal clear dollars. The driver asked if I wanted to stop to celebrate. I shook my head. The only possible commemoration would be seeing in Ryan's eyes the reflection of his absolute defeat. Understanding that even behind bars he tried to steal something from me that no longer existed, I arrived at the visiting room dressed in a denim jacket, without bodyguards or lawyers. On the other side of the glass, Ryan looked haggard eyes, sunken from sleepless nights, in stubble poorly shaved. Upon sitting, he took the phone with anxiety. His first phrase was an almost childish whisper. "I need you to pay my bail," I replied with a euphonic fact. "I just sold the company for $3.5 million. There's nothing left you can claim." He swallowed saliva, pupils dilated by disbelief. He murmured something inaudible. He hit the table and then released the phrase he had rehearsed 1,000 times for me. "I am going to destroy you, old man." I smiled with the calm of a surgeon contemplating a heart beating in his palm. "You already tried. You arrived late to your own execution." I hung up the handset without waiting for a reply. He hit the glass, but the shaking only resonated like a hollow echo as I left the prison. The second tranche of the Swiss payment chimed on my mobile. The last disbursement was missing, and the signing of the Labor Trust planned for the following dawn. Chess showed a clean board without enemy rooks. In the distance, journalists and opinion columnists, eager for bait, were approaching. But the bait was smoke. The Miller Empire no longer belonged to the family, but to history. I returned home while the city lights went out with parsimony. At the kitchen table, Mary waited for me with 2 cups of coffee. Without saying a word, I opened the envelope containing the draft of my new life deed. A small technical scholarship foundation for children of workers, financed with half the net funds from the sale. The rest would go to our modest retirement on a ranch in the interior, far from offices and boards of directors. Mary read the document, closed her eyes, and nodded. We did not need ceremonies. We had gone through a fire and against all odds kept our skin whole. I went up to the office and kept the yellow helmet in a glass display case. With a simple label, it served to build dreams and to tear down lies. Upon closing the door, I felt the definitive creak. The past cooled like cured concrete. The 3rd Swiss transfer would arrive at dawn. Then would come the signing of the worker trust, and after it, silence. A dense but clean silence that would carry printed the echo of every mix, every sacrifice, every neutralized betrayal. Tomorrow the penultimate play would begin. Appear before the press, expose the truth with documents, and show without an ounce of vanity how experience can become a guillotine when youthful ambition forgets to honor who fed it. But that scene, the prelude to public devastation, belongs to the next act. I turned off the light. The darkness no longer tasted of fear, it tasted of vindication. The last tranche of the Swiss payment appeared in the fiduciary account minutes before dawn. A line of banking encryption and the beating of my pulse marked the irrevocable consummation. There was no longer any empire to steal. I prevented satisfaction from numbing me. It was still necessary to expose to the light everything the shadows had planned. At 7, I signed the worker trust deed together with Cecilia. A representative from each area stamped their signature. Some cried, others squeezed my hands with calluses I knew from the foundations. That massive gesture armored the operation better than any law firm. We left the notary, and an improvised choir sang, "For he's a jolly good fellow." Never had a childish anthem sounded so insurgent. The next stop was the National Civic Forum. Andrew had rented it with discretion and transformed it into a press room with 15 selected seats. There would be no confusing plurality, only economic journalists with incorruptible trajectories, 3 certified cameras, and simultaneous translation for foreign correspondents. Every seat had a sealed folder with the word Veritas and a flash drive attached. Inside, a complete copy of contracts, emails, and the recordings that captured the conspiracy. While technicians mounted lights, I remembered the scene where Ryan, at 20 years old, asked me to go to Harvard. He held the glass with trembling hands, assuring, "I promise every dollar will be one more brick in your dream." Now those bricks would stand as an accusatory wall before the whole country. The symbolism was almost poetic, the irony lethal. Mid-morning, D.A. Stone notified that Ramsey and Carter were trying to bribe guards to facilitate escape. The offer of $10,000 ended in another formal accusation bribery within a penitentiary center. The conceptual bars transformed into reinforced steel. With every desperate maneuver, my son dug a deeper moat. 12 o'clock sharp. The first camera turned on. I took a deep breath and went out to the podium without notes or teleprompter. I carried only the child's helmet, now inside a transparent urn. The murmur ceased. I declared with a clear voice the sale of Miller Industries, the creation of the Labor Trust, and the redistribution of assets. Every fact appeared backed on the side screens, timed like Swiss machinery. Then I projected the video, where Ryan offered bribes to the witnesses. The room held its breath. When he confessed the intention to commit me, some reporters let out choked exclamations. There was no room for questions. The evidence spoke for itself. I closed the exposition with the phrase I had been sharpening for days. In business, healthy ambition ascends, greed collapses. Today I demonstrate that experience can rescue the foundations before greed turns everything into rubble. An avalanche of flashes was unleashed. I remained imperturbable until the moderator ordered a cut. Upon leaving, 2 cameramen offered me their hand, former students of a scholarship program I financed years ago. The vital circle closed with mathematical exactitude. The repercussion was immediate. In a matter of hours, the news programs headlined Patriarch Dismantles Family Plot and Donates Company to Workers. The shares of complicit firms suffered sharp drops. Suppliers withdrew credit lines to societies linked to Ramsey. The judge who had assigned the dubious orders resigned before the Judiciary Council initiated a disciplinary investigation. That afternoon, I visited the jail one last time. Ryan waited in the contact room escorted by 2 extra guards. His countenance had cracked. No trace remained of the self-assured executive. He took the handset without drama eyes, opaque. "Dad, I saw the conference," he murmured. "Everyone has turned their back on me," I replied with a firm voice, without apparent resentment. Only daggers or applause reached the back. "You chose the edge," he averted his gaze. He muttered something similar to a pardon, then a plea that I intercede to change prison for house arrest. I remembered the child who fell asleep in my lap, but also the adult who wished for my burial. Without raising my tone, I said I taught my workers that every beam must support the weight that corresponds to it. "Support yours?" I hung up. Upon getting up, I saw in the reflection of the glass a hunched silhouette. It took me a second to recognize it was his, not mine. I returned to the office and found a package without a sender. Inside the manila envelope Ryan had delivered to Dr. Harrison and an anonymous note. "Forgive me, I did not know the magnitude of the damage. The doctor ruined, sought redemption. I archived the evidence. His destiny would remain in the hands of justice, not mine." Past 11, I turned on the old transistor radio I used in the first bricklayer crew. It tuned a ballad while I updated the post-sale balance. 7 clean figures half already assigned to scholarships. The rest distributed in conservative investments that would ensure medical care and a modest retirement. No yacht, no penthouse. I do not need luxuries to sleep peacefully. Then my mobile rang. It was Lewis, the loyal banker. His voice vibrated with disbelief. "Engineer, the unionized staff is gathered outside the branch. They say they want to thank you in person." I leaned out the window. A line of trucks and motorcycles snaked down the avenue. Workers with helmets painted blue held improvised banners. "Thanks for believing in us, loyalty pays." Some raised miniature copies of the yellow helmet in cardboard. I went down without escort. The applause hit harder than any audit. One of the veteran welders gifted me a piece of steel, cut with laser in the shape of a gear, so that I remember that the pieces, if they fit with honor, never rust. I kept the object in the inside pocket of the jacket near the heart. It was the antidote against the poison of disloyalty. I concluded the day drafting the speech I would read tomorrow before the National Labor Relations Board. I would request the official cancellation of the layoffs Ryan had scheduled. I wanted it recorded in the minutes that betrayal would not inherit labor destruction. Past midnight, Mary approached with a sealed envelope the invitation from the National Technical University to receive an honorary doctorate for ethical commitment to engineering and social justice. She smiled faintly. We understood without words that history had twisted its course, but the river continued flowing with a dignified current. I closed the day looking at the helmet in the urn and the steel gear next to it. 2 relics, one of childhood and another of maturity, witnesses of the same lesson. There is no weapon more blunt than well-administered experience. On that improvised altar I turned off the light. The revenge was virtually consummated, but the public verdict would reach its climax the following day, when the courts read to Ryan the complete list of charges, while the world press rebroadcast every syllable. The calm before the final thunder settled in the house like dense mist. I breathed deep, feeling for the first time in months a glimpse of rest. Tomorrow would arrive the definitive demolition of my heir's reputation and the official birth of a new era built on foundations that not even filial hate could crack. I adjusted my father's pocket watch and let it mark time on the nightstand. Every tick resonated like a hammer on a nail. One more blow is missing, just one to seal the lid of this coffin of lies. That last stab, public and noisy Tuesday, dawned with a brazenly blue sky, as if the city were anxious to witness the outcome. At 9, the courthouse bustled with cameras, microphones, and onlookers. On the esplanade, they improvised a platform for live broadcast. On the giant screens, it read, "Organized Crime Hearing, Miller versus Miller Case." The echo of that family paradox rumbled in every corner. I entered accompanied only by Andrew and an officer from the DA's office who carried 2 boxes labeled Evidence A and Evidence B. Inside the forged contracts, the transfers, the audios of the plot. I did not need more weaponry. Reality was enough dynamite. The main room, with capacity for 300 people, was packed. Judges in black robes on the podium. Defense lawyers aligned like nervous chips. In the background, worker representatives with their blue helmets. In the first row, Mary holding my father's pocket watch, immutable witness of 4 generations. The murmurs ceased when escorts brought in Ryan. He wore a beige jumpsuit, steel handcuffs, and a hollow look that did not manage to hide the resentment. The central magistrate opened the session. He enumerated without hesitation every imputed crime: aggravated bank fraud, falsification of medical opinions, conspiracy for illegitimate deprivation of liberty, bribery of officials, industrial espionage, attempted bribery. For every charge, the screen showed documents with official seals and fully verified signatures. Every paragraph read by the judge was a slab falling on the accused. When it was the turn of testimonies, I did not raise my voice an iota. 45 phrases were enough for me, all measured with surgical meticulousness, recounting how I discovered the conspiracy, describing the strategy of recording evidence, exposing the irrevocable sale of the company, and finally confirming the creation of the Labor Trust. No word sought revenge, only stated facts. The desolation in Ryan's eyes revealed that the truth punished more cruelly than any speech of hate. Ramsey tried to invalidate my declaration, alleging excessive emotionality. The judge reminded him that emotionality does not disqualify technical evidence. Carter wanted to deny his participation, but the video, where he demanded firing 1,000 workers, occupied the gigantic screen. His face twitched, became a meme before the hearing ended. 3 hours later, the magistrate dictated preventive prison for Ryan and his partners, while the firm sentence was prepared. The crowd erupted in murmurs of astonishment. I remained standing until the guards let him out. Passing by me, he murmured something unrecognizable, a cross between a plea and hate. I did not answer. It was enough to look at him without rage for him to understand that there was nothing left to rescue, neither inheritance nor surname, nor the smallest crack to slip through. We went out to the esplanade, and the workers formed a human corridor. They did not chant my name or wave banners. They simply touched their helmets with 2 fingers. Fraternal crew, salute. That silent gesture weighed more than an ovation. I walked slowly among them, feeling that every step sealed a chapter and opened a new territory. That afternoon, the world press flooded the networks with headlines that seemed extracted from a modern Greek tragedy. Patriarch dismantles filial plot company sold in secret to save it from greed, iron lesson on trust and betrayal. Shares of Carter's consultancy fell 32% on the stock market. The medical board immediately suspended Dr. Harrison's license. Ramsey's notary office was closed down. The domino effect was unstoppable. However, my objective was not the spectacle. That same night, at the headquarters of the new trust, I signed the first 40 technical scholarships for children of welders and electricians. I also authorized soft loans for internal entrepreneurs who wanted to open small subsidiary construction companies. The seed of a more plural legacy germinated in real time. Upon concluding, I invited Mary to tour the main building for the last time. The lights were off. Only the emergency lamps drew elongated shadows on the marble. We went up to the 12th floor, where my office remained empty except for the glass urn. Inside, the small yellow helmet rested illuminated by a beam of auxiliary lighting. I knew it was time to say goodbye. I opened the urn, slid the helmet between my hands, and felt the rough texture of worn plastic. That object had been a witness to Ryan's childhood and symbol of my trust. Now it was a relic of warning about the dangers of arrogance. I kept it in a canvas backpack and turned on the mobile recorder. This building is closing. I dictated the coordinates of the future no longer belong to my generation. May the next ones raise their own walls, guided by the memory of what happened here. I left the master key on the bare desk, turned off the light, and left without looking back. Upon closing the door, the security system changed to code Red Finale, definitive closure, without possibility of reopening except by unanimous approval of the worker trust. The circle closed with a community padlock, not of ego. 2 days later, we left for the ranch in the interior. 50 acres of oaks, a clear river, and the distant sound of cattle. There, Alba, the mixed-breed dog adopted during the pandemic, received us. She ran toward me with simple joy, reminding me that real loyalty never needs contracts. I hung the helmet on the barn porch and breathed air that smelled of grass and honesty. The phone had almost no signal. Still, the final notification from the court arrived: formal trial, dated for 6 months, from now probability of conviction exceeding 25 years. I felt no pleasure nor relief, only the certainty that order was restored. The following days I dedicated to cutting dry branches, repairing fences, and sowing vegetable seeds every sunset. While the sky turned orange, I mentally reviewed the chain of events that led us there. I found no glory in victory. I found a brutal teaching. Decades build wisdom that admits no shortcuts. Whoever tries to usurp it without understanding its foundations is crushed under their own weight. A week later, I received a handwritten letter from Ryan. It said barely, "I know I understand what I did. I have a lifetime to reflect. If someday I can rebuild something useful, maybe you will find forgiveness." I did not answer. Immediately, I nailed the sheet to the barn plank, right next to the steel gear the welder gave me. There it will remain yellowing until time decides if it deserves an answer. Meanwhile, the foundation started its first advanced masonry workshop. 16 young people wielded trowels and levels under the supervision of veteran masters. At the end of the class, one of them approached timidly. "Mr. Miller, how do you overcome the fear of messing up the foundations?" I smiled, remembering every early morning of poorly mixed concrete, every unpaid invoice, every betrayal already in the rearview mirror. With 2 things I told him: the humility to measure 3 times before cutting, and the courage to accept that even so, one day you will have to demolish and start over. The boy nodded as if those words weighed less than the shovel, but more than fresh concrete. I saw him return to the line, eager to raise the next wall. That night, sitting on the porch with Mary by my side and the singing of crickets wrapping the darkness, I understood that no trace of hate remained in my spirit. Revenge had not been an end, but a means to restore balance. The true triumph was the silent peace that now embraced me. I looked at the sky, studded with stars, and let my father's watch beat in my pocket. Every tick marked a future where the surname Miller would not equal fortune nor scandal, but a luminous warning: underestimating experience can cost more than any commercial war. I inhaled deep, exhaled slow, and pronounced in an almost inaudible voice: "Work concluded." The night wind carried that phrase toward the oaks, maybe to embed it in the bark and remind every ambitious young person who one day passes by here, because the lesson remained written, not in headlines or sentences, but in the earth itself. Whoever feeds betrayal harvests ruins. Whoever forges with honesty raises eternities. And with that thought, the whole universe seemed to nod in silence.